Let's see what else. Randy Hall also wondering about how many commits Georgia could get in the month of June. Well, we know this. We know that David Cooper and Pierce Spurlin were certainly hinting at some big things coming up, in the month of June here. So we talked about that a little bit yesterday. We'll get with Jeff more about this tomorrow when he joins us on the show. But certainly the expectation is that it could be a very big month for Georgia. And we said this, it's kind of interesting how the official visit calendar has really kind of landed on June as being a very significant month. Obviously, we understand why that is. With high school seasons starting in August and with July kind of being that dead period, it's the time to kind of get in. So it's not just the fact that there could be multiple commitments. I guess you're also thinking about some very big trophies being put on the wall there as well, for sure. Or, maybe we're in that day and age where the NIL is going to, cause more people to want to take it as far into the calendars they can. Dogs Only says, is it going to be an extra fun show today? Yeah, I think it is. We've got a lot of stuff for you. And, I'll be very honest and transparent for a second. One of the challenges is when everybody in the world is talking about the same thing, one of the challenges is to try to put your own spin on all of that. And so that's the issue. It's like, so last night, I'll give you, I think a lot of us were kind of the same way, where it's like, you're maybe looking at your phone, it's a very busy week for me. Y'all don't care about this, but it's a very busy week for me. It's my daughter's 7th birthday today. Happy birthday to Kate. My son's finishing up his baseball season. I'm, coaching that team. My wife's got a lot going on. We've had some health issues, not for ourselves, thankfully, but just, some things like that. We just had a lot kind of going on in our lives here. And so it's one of those things when you finally get down to sit on the couch at 10:30 at night or 11 o'clock at night or whatever else and just kind of catch your breath for a minute, you look at Twitter and all of a sudden you say, oh my gosh, Nick Saban said what? Like, it really was kind of one of those things, and I think a lot of us kind of had the same kind of reaction to that. Nick Saban went there? Wow. And so as someone who knows that this is going to dominate the conversation the next day, the trick is, okay, so how do you take the thing that everybody's talking about and how do you kind of put your own spin on that a little bit to make what you're doing kind of unique compared to the rest of the chatter that's out there? So hopefully we'll do a good job of doing that today. But I do agree with the commenter, though. It should be a very fun show. Dogs Only, thanks for saying that. Ohio Dog says the intro music's so powerful it reminds me of a Batman movie. That's our we call our animated open there, and we like to. I kind of like the cinematic orchestral score for that. We've used certain little cinematic things from time to time. I just like doing that kind of stuff, so I'm glad that you enjoy that. Vidal Simp checking in today, too, with a little BA smile. Appreciate that, Vidal. Brian Whitehead checking in. Let's see what else. Bill Russell checking in from St. Augustine. Boy, what a great place that is. Great place that is. Ohio Dog also patiently waiting for Texas A&M to purchase his services, which is very funny, for sure. James Lawson also brings up a pretty good point that Georgia couldn't pick a better offseason to be champions. I think that's true. In some respects, Georgia may be the last national champion. It just seems almost impossible to think that we're not heading from some sort of severing at some point in time where the sport's just going to look a good bit different than it does right now. And, maybe Georgia will look back on as kind of like the series finale of the old version of college football. By the way, welcome in Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Good morning to all of you on video. We'll start up here in just a moment. But what we're talking about is, the way in which college football is changing, the fact that Georgia's national champions at kind of a good time, in that, hey, there's drama going on all over the place. For the most part, Georgia is a spectator to that drama, not really a participant in it. And it's not because the sport's passing them by. There are going to be all kinds of, hucksters, whatever else, are going to come step up. Georgia can't keep pace, or, whatever else, some sort of, panic peddling that's going to go on here. But just keep in mind is that not only is Georgia the reigning national champion, Georgia's also in conversation for the top recruits in the country here once again. Remember this. We've predicted on this show that Georgia's going to land Arch Manning. It seems like Georgia's in a pretty good position for that. So not only is Georgia's national championship season untainted by the drama that's dominating so much of the rest of the sport, for now, Georgia's 2023 recruiting class also, for the most part, seems to be unmolested by the drama that's going on here there as well. So important to keep those things in mind. All right, a couple of the comments. We'll get ready to get started. Randy Hall says A&M's a golden ATM card. Some people seem to think so. Apparently Nick Saban does. We'll give you that audio here in a moment. Jerry Lloyd checks in to say, trying to work on parking for the Oregon game, but have not been able to identify when spots will be made available. Yeah, I don't have information on that. I mean, I do know this is that you should expect DawgNation to do something really big that day. I've had some meetings about this already, but those have been pretty preliminary. But you should definitely expect us to do something really big on that. And as far as like when the parking would go on sale, yeah, I don't know. I mean, a lot of that's going to be day of the event type parking too, right? I mean, I guess there is some reserved parking, in advance, but a lot of that's going to be day of. Big Natty Dog says that Manning's recruiting is different and that money's not a factor. Yeah, at least it seems to be the case right now. All right, so good comments all the way around. It is as one of our commenters said, a wild show today. Nick Saban has gone and said it, and it sort of leads to a huge conversation. Folks are mad at him because they feel like he called them out, Deion Sanders in particular. We'll get there to that. But we'll also talk about, listen, around here, one of the things that we do is we keep receipts. And some of what Deion's trying to say now in the aftermath of what Nick Saban said is a good bit different than what he said in the past. And Jimbo Fisher's kind of the same way. See, here's the issue with all this. There's a lot of lying going on. And there's so much lying going on that it's sort of hard to know what the real truth is. But it is a fascinating conversation, I have to admit that. And Georgia somehow, some ways, kind of certainly in the middle of it because they are on top of the college football world with everybody doing whatever they can to get back up to that level. So let's throw it all out there. Let's see how it goes. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather and Tharp on a fascinating day. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Oh, my goodness. You already know that this time of year is talking season, and I think we've even referenced that already this week, that this is the time of year in which coaches are traveling around Rubber Chicken Circuit, Booster Club meetings, things like that. It is talking season. We like talking season because we like to talk. But last night, the so-called talking season got injected with some Ivan Drago level steroids. Rocky IV reference for those of you from the 80s. Nick Saban last night went there in a way that I didn't think he'd ever go there. I mean, Nick Saban's one of those guys that I typically think of as kind of choosing his words carefully and the kind of person who typically has some sort of agenda behind what he said. There's oftentimes a little bit of a strategy and, frankly, very little actual genuine emotion, I would believe. A lot of this is sometimes the kind of emotion he turns on to send whatever message that he's trying to send. Last night, I'm not quite so sure that's the version of Nick Saban we got. You heard the phrase like 4D chess before, where you're trying to like strategize way into the future to manipulate all the pieces in the board the way that you want them to go. I'm not quite so sure that's what Nick Saban was doing, and this is the thing right now that every college football fan is talking about, Georgia fans included. So let me begin here with Nick Saban. I'll get it to Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs here in a moment, but at first you just kind of need to know kind of what's going on here with all of this. So like some sort of like meeting last night. The honest truth is I really don't know what the meeting actually was, but there were a lot of like potential Alabama boosters in the room. This is Saban. Nate Oates, the basketball coach, was there. There was some media obviously there. Last question of the night in the Q&A is related to NIL issues going on right now. Saban spoke, and I've listened to the full transcript here, the full clip. Saban spoke for 7 minutes on the subject of NIL last night. The three, I guess, juiciest things that he said, I pulled out for you here right now, starting with kind of a general concern that he has about NIL related to the boosters who are funding all of this at the moment. Let's start with this and then work our way to the best stuff after that. Nick Saban from last night.
One of you folks are going to give some player that comes to our school a bunch of money to come to our school. And then you're going to come to the game in full strut, thinking I'm going to tell everybody I got that guy to come to Alabama. And then he's not going to play, and he's going to transfer, and you're going to say, I'm never going to do this again. All right, so I don't know how it works. I don't know how you sustain a model like that.
So I think that's an important clip from Nick Saban in that I think it illustrates what a lot of coaches believe. I would dare say at least the overwhelming majority, if not all of them, feel this way. I don't really know that many coaches who have a problem with players getting paid. I really don't. I don't believe Nick Saban has a problem with that. I don't believe Kirby Smart has a problem with that. I really don't know of any coach in particular. There may be somebody somewhere, but I don't know of any coach in particular that has a problem with players getting paid in this new NIL era in which we live. But what Saban articulates there is with the issue that I believe that most folks have. By folks, I mean coaches here. They don't like the booster involvement. Because I've told you before that whoever signs the checks owns the company, and whoever pays you is your boss. I don't think Nick Saban likes the idea of a booster, someone outside the Alabama program gaining influence over the Alabama players. I think that Saban thinks that's probably a mistake. I think he's probably right to feel that way. I think that most coaches probably do. That we vet coaches pretty well over the course of years. And even if they were motivated to do something against a player's better interest for their own best interest, eventually the market would catch them on that and they'd be punished for it. And that's kind of how we vet coaches. We don't have the opportunity to vet boosters in the same way if they are self-serving, if they are short-sighted. We don't really know in many cases who a lot of these people are. Some of them more famous than others. But they're just not quite as well vetted. And now they are becoming seemingly a pretty important constituency within the world of college athletics. You've had administrators, players, coaches. All of a sudden now there's this new category. We've always had boosters, but it's like a more empowered version of the booster. And I think that people who've been caretakers of college athletics for as long as Nick Saban have been, I think they're rightly concerned about that. I think Saban's phrasing on that's probably worth considering. But that's not the part from last night that everybody's going to remember. It's at the end of the 7-minute rant from Nick Saban where things got really interesting because Nick Saban started firing off names. He was naming names last night, including essentially sounding like a message board poster when talking about Jimbo Fisher and the Texas A&M Aggies. You may have heard this. If you haven't, buckle your seatbelt. Nick Saban from Wednesday night.
You've read about them. You know who they are. I mean, we were second in recruiting last year. A&M was first. A&M bought every player on their team, made a deal for name, image, and likeness. All right, we didn't buy one player. All right, but I don't know if we're going to be able to sustain that in the future because more and more people are doing it.
Nick Saban said Texas A&M bought every player on their team. He means their signing class. Now, we're not doing that. But A&M bought every player on their team. As I said before, doesn't that sound like, Bama Bill from Alabaster on, whatever message board or wherever else? I mean, that is about as unhinged as you're going to get from Saban. And oftentimes there's a strategy behind a lot of the stuff that he says. He used the media to get to his players, or he uses the media to send some sort of message somehow. Honestly, this just sort of feels like getting something off his chest. To me, your feelings on this may be different, but this to me just sort of feels like a little bit of a rant. It feels like one of those things that's more emotion than strategy on the part of Nick Saban. And by the way, it's not just A&M that he was calling out by name. He also goes down the road of John Ruiz at Miami, Deion Sanders at Jackson State, more from Nick Saban, and then we'll build to a point on this.
We have a rule right now that says you cannot use name, image, and likeness to entice a player to come to your school. Hell, read about it in the paper. I mean, Jackson State paid a guy $1 million last year that was a really good Division I player to come to school. It was in the paper, and they bragged about it. Nobody did anything about it. I mean, these guys at Miami that are going to play basketball there for $400,000, it's in the newspaper. The guy tells you how he's doing it. But the NCAA can't enforce their rules because it's not against the law. And that's an issue. That's a problem. And unless we get something that protects them from litigation, I don't know what we're going to do about it.
So I think the first thing to do here is just kind of pause and say, wow, that's some really juicy commentary on the part of Nick Saban. And that's really kind of fun. I mean, we all would say, I think for the most part, that coaches too frequently are just really buttoned up and almost scared to say anything, if not scared, just unwilling to say anything. And most comments from most big-time coaches have a feeling of being pretty boring from time to time. So anytime something's not boring, anytime something's not, the stuff you've heard a million times before, it's probably just kind of nice to sort of pause and say, man, that's really a little bit different than what we normally hear. And from Nick Saban right there, that's a little bit different from what we normally hear. And so just to sort of pause and, wow, that's something, just kind of doing that probably makes some sense. However, beyond that, I think you kind of build to a more important point, a little bit more serious point. That to me, if you want to argue against the current NIL culture that we have in college athletics, I think you have to argue against this on one of two grounds. And if you listen to anybody who comes across as like anti-NIL, I think, or at least from a binary sense, like, you know, for someone who's addressing some skepticism about it or critical of it in any way, if you're going to have an anti-NIL take, it's got to come from one of two places. Either you are arguing on behalf of what's going to allow your program to thrive, or you are arguing on what's going to allow college athletics to survive. There are two different ways to argue against NIL. Does this allow Alabama to thrive, in Nick Saban's case? Does it allow college football to survive? And to me, the problem with Nick Saban and the words here, and the same thing from the other day, do you remember from the golf tournament in Birmingham last week when he was talking about, hey, we got to get parity back to college football again, meaning more equality across the various programs. And everybody kind of laughed at that because college football has never really had parity, and Nick Saban has been the biggest beneficiary of the lack of parity in college football because Alabama's dominated so much. People essentially just laughed Nick Saban off the stage because what he was saying just sounded so unhinged and so disconnected from reality. But Saban at the time seemed to be making that argument because that's the argument that he believed was going to allow Alabama to thrive, to kind of complain about the current system. Once again, it's kind of the same thing here where by saying, well, what about Texas A&M supposedly buying every player? What about Jackson State supposedly giving Travis Hunter $1 million, as Nick Saban says, or John Ruiz, the famous booster at Miami, who openly bragged about paying a big six-figure sum to a recent Miami basketball transfer? When Nick Saban rants about that, the way that he does in the statement from last night, it comes across as if he's just simply arguing for whatever he thinks it's going to take to make sure Alabama continues to thrive. And that's fine to be self-serving that way. But that doesn't make you a leader in the sport. And right now, what the sport needs is a leader. So it'd be nice, I'd say, as Nick Saban, the most high-profile figure in college athletics still, even to the age of 70, it'd be nice if he'd show some leadership, if he'd be more than just the leader of Alabama football, but apparently that's all he really wants to do. Now, I'm going to make a comparison here for a moment between Saban and Kirby Smart. And I really feel like that Kirby Smart, when he has expressed some skepticism about NIL, when he's expressed some concern about NIL, to me, he comes across as less guy who just wants to make sure his program thrives, and he comes across a little bit more as guy who wants to make sure college athletics survives. And maybe the word survive is too fatalistic for you, I understand that, but there is clearly a stability that college sports has rested on that I do believe is threatened by some of the stuff that's going on right now. And when all Nick Saban does is argue on behalf of whatever's good for Alabama, I don't think he's helping the situation. Smart, on the other hand, who's got a big program in his own right in Georgia, who's got a lot longer to live in this era of the NIL world than Nick Saban's going to, one way or another. Smart, I do think, comes across as a little more leader-oriented, a little more big-picture-oriented, a little more what's good for college athletics overall. And as a comparison on that, let's let you hear Kirby from also the golf tournament in Birmingham last week. He was on WJOX. The host, Cole Kubelik, said, hey, you can change anything about college athletics, anything about college football, any rule you want. What's the rule that you change? Listen to how Kirby argues for how NIL could be improved to benefit everybody and not just the team that he coaches. This was Kirby from last week.
You know, I would probably look into something uniform for NIL. You know, there's a certain point where certain players have an ability to make a lot of money, and I think that's great for the guys that have earned it, that are marketable, just like the same guys in the NFL earn it and get it. You know, there's certain positions that get more than others, but if you could make it a uniform deal where, you know, the schools that have the capacity to give, some schools can't afford to do NIL. Some schools just don't have the support base to do that, but the ones in schools that are marketable and they can do that, it would be nice to be able to give each one something, but not make it out of control that it affects the game. But I think that's hard to do. It's hard to manage because every situation is different. Every player is different. Look, Keely Ringo at one time had NIL deals, and then after the game with Alabama, that changed, right? So things change over the course of time, and the market kind of sets itself in that regard.
I think Kirby's overall viewpoint on how NIL is, how it should be, is actually probably not all that dissimilar to Nick Saban's. But when Kirby talks about this on the radio last week, he comes across as a guy discussing what's it going to take for college football to survive. Whereas when Nick Saban talks about these same kind of things in the unhinged rant you heard a moment ago, He comes across as, what's it going to take for my program to thrive? And that level of selfishness is just not what college football needs right now. Frankly, I don't have time to play 7 minutes of Nick Saban audio, but you should go listen to the full thing, because actually some of what Nick Saban said, including the NCAA occasionally getting a bad rap, including how you could maybe take really good care of players, some of the things that Nick Saban said last night were actually pretty thoughtful, and they were actually, I believe, pretty helpful potentially for college athletics. But the problem is, the only stuff that people remember is the overly emotional complaints at the end because A&M maybe have took a player that he wanted, or Jackson State, got Travis Hunter and may have paid $1 million for that. People are going to gravitate towards the soap opera part of this, when some of what Nick Saban actually said is probably pretty helpful. So if Nick Saban wants to be a leader for college athletics, or if he just wants to pad his own retirement, he certainly has the right to do. But if he wants to be a leader for, if he wants to be a leader for college athletics, I'd suggest in this particular case, sounding a little bit more like Kirby Smart might be the right thing to do, because thus far, I've been pretty happy with the way that Kirby's talked about this, because ultimately, a program like Georgia is going to pretty much thrive no matter what. Whatever college athletics looks like 5 years from now, 50 years from now, you have to imagine that Georgia's going to be one of the 2 or 3 biggest brands in the entire sport. As long as there is a college football, the Georgia brand is going to be pretty big within that college football atmosphere, I have to believe. However, Kirby is a guy who came up as the son of a high school coach and, still certainly very committed to high school football in Georgia and across the South, really across the country. I think that Kirby thinks about more than just what's good for him. And we need more guys like that in college athletics to think about not just what allows my program to thrive, but what guarantees this sport will survive. Because if certain people have their way, college football will be unrecognizable 36 months from now. And that's important to keep in mind. Now, as far as the juicy soap opera part of all of this, Nick Saban calling out folks by name, including Deion Sanders, well, guess what? Some of those guys, including Primetime himself, has already had a response to that. So we'll give you all of this coming up. But first, let's introduce the show. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented by Merriweather and Tharp, and we're glad to have you with us. No matter how you get to us today, live on video, starting at 9:45, 1st and 15, DawgNation.com, DawgNation app. 10 a.m. after that, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, all kinds of video platforms. Of course, the radio every day at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. Podcast, the Apple Player, Spotify, WorldFamousDawgNation.com. Lots of ways for you to get to us on the program here today, and we are happy to have you with us no matter how you get to us. And a huge thanks to our friends at Merriweather and Tharp for making it all possible. And I do truly think of Bob, Ashley Tharp, all of the folks there at Merriweather and Tharp, good friends of ours, and I am so glad they're out there for you there as well, because let's face it, the divorce process can be very scary, very confusing. It's one of those things where when you find yourself in the middle of all of that, you may be wondering, well, how did I get here, but how do I handle this right now? And I'm sure you got all kinds of people telling you all kinds of things. Block all of that out and put your attention on my friends at Merriweather and Tharp, because they've been through this thousands of times before. And yes, your situation is obviously specific to you when it comes to certain circumstances, but the institutional knowledge that you gain from going through this, as many times the Merriweather and Tharp attorneys have gone through this, that gives you a chance to leverage their expertise for your benefit. So if you reach out to them online, theatlantadivorceteam.com. That's theatlantadivorceteam.com. You can listen to podcasts. You can read blog posts. You can really educate yourself. And I think one of the cool things about this is that can set you up to ask really good questions when you have that first free initial consultation with one of those Merriweather and Tharp attorneys. And at that point in time, you're going to hear about how the law can be used for your benefit. And when it comes to finances, relationship with children, all the things that really matter here in life, that's what the Merriweather and Tharp team of attorneys is going to help you do. So please find them online, theatlantadivorceteam.com, theatlantadivorceteam.com. Merriweather and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce. So I hope you will check them out here today. All right, so before we get to Terence Edwards, we're going to get to him here in a moment. Let's get into the really juicy part of the Nick Saban stuff, which is what folks are saying back to him after Nick Saban said what he said. So he calls out Jimbo Fisher. He calls out Deion Sanders, calls out Miami. We haven't heard anything yet from Miami or Texas A&M, but we've heard, at least as of press time, as the smart folks like to say. But we have heard from Deion Sanders. Sanders on Twitter last night, let me show you this. basically saying that he's going to have a response coming up to all this. We have Deion's. Yeah, he says, I will be addressing the lies, Deion says, that were told by Coach Saban soon. Deion Sanders saying stay tuned there on Twitter. So I love the idea that Deion very quickly, in response to Nick Saban, had time to put some production value behind his tweet. I think there's something kind of interesting there about that. But Deion says that Nick Saban is lying when he says that Travis Hunter got paid $1 million to go from Collins Hill High School to Jackson State. At one point in time, we even heard it was like $2 million, whatever else. But here to me is the problem with all of this. It seems like everybody is lying, right? I mean, like, you hear Nick Saban now and he's crying poor when it comes to NIL, but he was in the state of Texas last year talking about how Bryce Young got $1 million. Like, he doesn't even really say that anymore. Like, that was just a thing he threw against the wall to see if it would stick last year, and all of a sudden now he's decided a different argument suits his purposes. So it's almost like he doesn't even, he literally, he's like a politician. He literally pretends he never said that. It's amazing to me that he just threw that out there. You know, the stenographers and the media ran with it. And ever since then, like, it's almost like he completely pretends like he just never said that because it doesn't really suit his purposes as much anymore. Did Bryce Young get $1 million or did he not? We don't really know. No one's ever dug too deep into all of this, but clearly one or the other statement from Nick Saban has to be a lie. So from that standpoint, if Deion Sanders is calling Nick Saban a liar, that is just factually true. One of these statements or the other from Nick Saban would appear to be a lie. But here's the issue. Deion Sanders is lying too. And he should not be able to get away with this just because he's a good guy and a good personality and everybody has fun with primetime. Deion Sanders should be called out for his lies as well, because the lack of truth from him is also making this conversation more difficult to have. Now you say, well, BA, why is Deion Sanders lying? Let me give you a couple of quick examples of this. All of a sudden, Deion, for whatever reason, has decided that it doesn't suit his purposes to embrace the NIL culture and brag about what either did or didn't happen with Travis Hunter or anybody else. So now Deion pretends they can't pay anybody, nor would they ever pay anybody. Not just in that particular tweet, but with, I think it was Rich Eisen. This is an old clip from a few months ago. Deion making it clear that there was no NIL deals going on at Jackson State, at least trying to. Let me let you hear Deion on that.
There's a lot of flack from the old guard about NIL and just pay many amounts of money and all this kind of stuff.
We ain't got no money.
To a school like,
we ain't got no money.
Can you just address all the stupidity out there for me, please?
$1.5 million. I heard $1.5 million, and I heard Dave Ford and Norman Barstool. That's the biggest lie I've ever heard. You know what that is? That means we kicked your butt. We took what was ours, and now you got to make up an excuse why. Ain't nobody did no $1.5 million. I wouldn't pay my son $1.5 million NIL. I'm gonna coach a guy that's making more than me.
So that's him basically echoing what he said in his tweet there a moment ago. We don't have any money to give anybody. Barstool Sports didn't give Travis Hunter 7-figure sum, whatever else. But here's the problem. A few months before that, go back to last summer when the NIL world was just beginning. At that time, Deion Sanders was more than happy to tell anybody that Jackson State wanted to be right in the NIL discussion and expected to be right in the NIL discussion. By the way, that audio is from ESPN a moment ago. I incorrectly attributed it before that. But Deion Sanders right there saying, there's no NIL money. We don't have any NIL money to give out. But that's not what he was saying prior to that. Let's go back to last summer for proof.
If it's August the 1st that they say we get paid by image and likeness, I promise you, August the 1st at 12:01, whatever time it is, we're going to lay some of y'all out. Y'all going to be straight. And y'all make me hold my word to that. But I don't lie. I cry to you while I do.
Not as easy to hear that, but what he says is, if August the 1st is the date the NIL stuff takes effect, right there at 12:01 a.m., basically we're going to be the first to start paying players. He says we're going to make y'all happy. So when it benefited him to say that they would be doing NIL, he's like, we're going to be the first to do it. We're going to make our players happy. We're going to be paying them. But then later on, when all of a sudden he was getting accused of leveraging that money to bring in a recruit like Travis Hunter, all of a sudden it behooved him not to say that anymore. So he started saying the opposite. Just like I said about Nick Saban a moment ago, both those statements from Deion Sanders can't be true. He is a liar either about the first thing that he said or the second thing that he said. So which part is he lying about? And by the way, the other big name in all of this, Jimbo Fisher, is the exact same way. You know, Fisher at one point in time was going around talking about how, like, hey, there's a new sheriff in town, and we're going to be, the payments have been happening for a long time, and all of a sudden now it's legal, and so basically we're using all this to our benefit. But then when people started really calling him out for all of this, and the extreme accusations showed up about, the $30 million or, basically similar to what we heard from Nick Saban a moment ago of the entire recruiting class essentially being paid for. Well, all of a sudden, much like Deion Sanders' tune changed, Jimbo Fisher's tune changed as well. So Saban appears to be lying here about something. Deion Sanders appears to be lying here about something. And guess what? Jimbo Fisher appears to be lying about something there as well, because after initially bragging about Texas A&M using its resources to bring in recruits, all of a sudden then in February his tune changed to this. This is Jimbo.
There is no $30 million fund. There is no $5 million. There is no $10 million. This is garbage, okay? And it does. It pisses me off that people, and here it comes from a site called Bro Bible by a guy named Sliced Bread. Then everybody runs with it. So it's written on the internet as gospel. How irresponsible is that? And then to have coaches in our league and across this league say it, clown acts. All right? Irresponsible as hell. Multiple coaches in our league. And the guy's griping about NIL, griping about transfer portal, using it the most and bragging about it the most. That's the ironic part. You want character? I'll take it with any of y'all. It's a joke.
Obviously, the only way this can end is with Sliced Bread being given the Pulitzer Prize. I mean, I think we would all agree that that's really the only fitting end of this entire discussion. But once again, an example from Jimbo Fisher there of singing a very different tune to what he had sung at one point in time of, hey, yeah, we're here. If you don't like it, get used to it, or whatever it was that he said. But suddenly he's like, Bro Bible, Sliced Bread, there's no $30 million or whatever else. And with so many people saying whatever helps them in the moment, Nick Saban included, it becomes really hard to know what's true with any of this. And that's the part I think that's really frustrating for fans, is that pretty clearly there, in the eyes of many people, is some chaos going on here. But which part's true and which part isn't? Is Travis Hunter at Jackson State because of $1 million, or is that Nick Saban unfairly maligning Deion Sanders? Did Jimbo Fisher buy the entire class, or did is that just crying over spilled milk? I think it becomes very hard to know because there are so little facts and so much, as I said before, self-serving arguments, talking about whatever you think might allow you to thrive in the moment, with very little concern for what's actually going to help college athletics survive through this tumultuous time. So that's kind of my opinion on that. I'm also curious to hear what Terence Edwards has to say about this, and you as well. We'll get to your comments here eventually. But for now, a guy who works with players, who was a player, who is a coach, who understands issues like this from a number of perspectives. Fascinating day to have Terence Edwards here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. So let's talk to him right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We will bring in Terence Edwards, great coach, working with a next generation of college athletes in many cases, and himself a former great player, and no doubt a guy that follows the issues around college athletics, college football in particular, very closely. Terence, a lot of folks today talking about what Nick Saban had to say last night, basically saying that Texas A&M bought its entire class. Deion Sanders paid Travis Hunter, or somebody on behalf of Deion paid Travis Hunter $1 million to go to Jackson State. The stuff at Miami, basically saying that Nick Saban's not quite so sure how long Alabama can keep doing what it's doing as long as that kind of craziness is allowed to be tolerated. What do you make of Nick Saban really, kind of coming unglued about an issue that's obviously been at the forefront of our minds now for quite some time? What'd you make of Saban last night?
I just think he said there's something that's been going on before I even played college football. So let's just keep it real. Like, schools have been buying players from the beginning of time. Now it's public. It's not against the rules anymore. And if it's true, because I don't know if Texas A&M actually bought the players, but if it's true, right now it's not against the rules. That's what the NIL has done. I don't think this is what this rule was intended for. I like the spirit of the rule that these players are able to capitalize on their name, likeness, image. When I was coming up, first say 25 years ago, once I signed that letter of intent to Georgia, Georgia owned all my rights to my God-given name, and now players are able to capitalize off that. Right now, the way it's going, I personally do not like the way that you can now, give a kid an opportunity to have a certain amount of money to go to your school. That part I don't like about it. I like, you going to a school because of, that's where you want to go. But there's a lot of people in a lot of situations that this is, the most money they probably will ever see in their life. And as an 18-year-old kid, I'm going to say this right now, I would have took advantage of that opportunity as well, as an 18-year-old kid. But let's go back, Chris. I was in a little different situation because my brother was a first-round draft pick. So coming out of high school, if I needed anything, my brother was able to buy it for me. But a lot of people come into situations that, family was just unfortunate. And this is an opportunity to put your family in a better situation. But just for, Coach Saban going out saying this, that they bought their class, publicly, I don't know why you would say that. We all understand what's going on. Just adding fuel to the fire. He is Nick Saban, and he, is the big dogs on the hill right now. I mean, even though we won the national championship last year, he's still a big dog on the hill that we're trying to consistently knock off. It could come off as sour grapes a little bit because he didn't get the number 1 class, but he got the number 2 ranked class. So I don't think he's going to be hurting for players at the end of the day.
I think that's really interesting. A couple of things you bring to mind that I want to talk about here for a moment. And listen, sitting here in this chair in kind of an official capacity, I'm not willing to stipulate on the record that any improper benefits have ever taken place, but let's just say for the sake of conversation they have at some point in time in college football's past. Given the fact that the sport seemed to kind of hum right along pretty efficiently while that was allegedly taking place, wasn't that better than what we have right now? I mean, in other words, if it was a grocery bag, under a kitchen table sometime in the past, if that kept the sport moving and that kept everybody happy, isn't that better than whatever this is, or am I wrong to say that?
I think you're right and wrong at the same time. I think, yes, it's something that was done up under the table. I think a lot of people know if someone was caught giving players, especially money, a large sum of money. I think it became a federal law at some point. I could be wrong, but I think it became a jailable offense dating back to the Fab Five. I think that guy was because he lied at the grand jury and all this stuff. So it's been going on for a long time, and college football was thriving and still was, I think, at its highest peak. And I think now it's turned to the Wild Wild West. On one hand, I do like it because I'm all for players being able to capitalize off their name, likeness, image. But there's also the fear of what you're saying. Like, even though it was under the table, it wasn't really talked about. And college football didn't have this pay-for-play type of thing where who can pay the most money, that's where I'm going. So, yes, I think you're right and wrong in that situation. And like I said, again, I'm for the players being able to capitalize, but I'm not for the spirit of where it's going right now.
Here's the other thing that I get a little bit frustrated about. Maybe this doesn't matter all that much, but it seems like it does. If I want to go back on the internet, Terence, and if I want to find out what you got paid in the CFL, that's somewhere, right? I mean, like professional athletes, their salaries are just very much in the record. People know what they are. I can tell you what everybody on the Braves makes, everybody on the Falcons makes. Like, we just talk about these kinds of salaries all the time. It's just a matter of kind of public record, commonly discussed, openly available. Yet with some of this NIL stuff, it's amazing to me how present the conversation is, how prevalent the conversation is, and yet it seems to rely on so few facts. Like Nick Saban at one point in time, it sounded good for him to say, my quarterback got $1 million. Now he wants to say, all my guys get paid the same thing, or at least they should get paid the same thing. At one point in time, Deion Sanders is saying, hey, we're going to give NIL right when we can start doing it. Now he's saying, we're not doing that. We literally don't know whether Travis Hunter got the big NIL deal or not, at least, kind of publicly available on the record there on that. Same thing for A&M. What did their guys get? What didn't they? Do you think it would be helpful if we had more on-the-record facts related to what's actually going on here? Because it's the same thing with like the Jordan Addison thing right now too, the wide receiver that's leaving Pitt. At one point in time, some radio host said that USC was going to give him $2 million. That just got treated as a fact by so many people without ever taking any time to verify that whatsoever. It's just amazing to me how much, kind of like the large numbers here just get sort of spat out into the rumor mill and nobody ever goes back to verify any of this. Do you think it would be helpful if we had more facts about what guys are actually being paid on the NIL front and who's actually being the one that pays them?
I think I'm torn right there. I'm really torn about making it public. There's a lot of kids, and let's just take when you're drafted out of high school back when our kids have been drafted 3 years. They're still young adults at 18 and come to this money overnight. And now social media can really hurt kids. And now people that are jealous about situations are trying to hurt these kids because of the money that they have. They could be targets. Then on the other end, you have that, yes, let's find out who's getting what so we can figure out if there's some illegal transactions going on, is who's paying it, where is it coming from. But now we don't know where it's coming from. We all can say it came from an NIL deal, but what if it came? So there's a lot of uncertainty around what's going on. I think people just want transparency of where is it coming from, how much it is it illegal? Because I think everybody in a day just want a fair playing ground to be able to recruit kids, being able to get kids on your campus. I just think people want a fair playing ground and not so much of what ifs or untruths or people just throwing out numbers just to make one school look bad. So I do think there's some transparency that needs to go on one hand, yes.
Do you think that Nick Saban knows what he's doing, picking a fight with Deion Sanders? Because, Terrence, people like Deion. Deion's, very good on TV, got a big social media following. Deion is kind of viewed as a cool dude. People Deion, going back to my childhood, Deion's been a big figure for a lot of people for a very long time. Nick Saban has, for the most part, been really respected. But if you go messing around trying to pick a fight with Deion Sanders, Deion's not just going to sit back and do nothing about that. He's already, kind of getting involved with some of this on social media. This could hurt Saban a little bit if he gets into a little bit of a scrap with Deion because Deion knows how to use words to his advantage. Do you think Saban knows what he's doing right here?
I personally think it helps Deion in this area. It helps Deion recruit because now he can go to a young man's living room and say, look, I have the big dog talking about us. So if the big dog is talking about Jackson State or HBCU, we must be doing something right. I can do this, X, Y, and Z for you because the great Nick Saban, who has all these national championships, have put all these players in the NFL, is worried about Jackson State now. If he wasn't worried about Jackson State, he would not have put us in the same sentence as he did. So I think it's a positive for Deion, and he can spin it in a way that he can now continue to go in these kids' living room and we doing something right because Nick Saban is talking about us in a public forum.
I also kind of like the fact that Kirby Smart, and obviously he's got opinions on this, everybody does. We played some of the audio that he shared on this. I kind of like the idea that Kirby Smart's, for the most part, not in this drama. It's Kirby seems to be taking a pretty measured approach to this. Kirby's not the one going back war of words with Jimbo Fisher or Deion or anybody else. How do you feel about the fact that, for the most part, Kirby's kind of sidestepping this drama right now, polishing his national championship trophy, working on his own 2023 recruiting class, and crazy stuff's going on all around him. But it doesn't seem like he's that impacted by all of this yet. What do you make of Kirby's demeanor while the rest of the college ball world seems to be in smoldering embers right now?
I think it's great for Kirby and Georgia Bulldogs just flying up under the radar. Continue doing what he's doing on the recruiting trail, trying to get the best players you could get. And personally, I don't think if we're trying to lure a Manning to your school, I don't think you probably want your school to be in all this talk negatively. I think you want to spin your university in a positive light, and that can probably continue to help in a recruitment of an Arch Manning and a player such of a family lore name like that. So staying out of this drama, I think it's helping Kirby. Now he just could fly up on the radar while everyone else continues to bicker and fight. He's just secretly up under the table, going out doing what he's doing.
No, I like the idea of that. Let me finish with this if you don't mind. So where do we go from here, Terrence? How do you fix this? Because like, clearly, I think there are some people who would like to see some uniform rules, but, I mean, as Nick Saban did point out last night, and I think he's right for saying this, listen, the NCAA's tried to do this, and every time they try to make a rule about something, they just get dragged to court and they end up losing. So, if you try to limit NIL, you get sued for that. If you try to limit transfer portal, some people believe you're going to get sued for that. In fact, there have been, some suits kind of related to some of this kind of stuff. So how do you fix this, or do you just not worry about fixing it, just letting it be as wild as it is? If I made you in charge right now, what would you do, and what would you try to convince everybody to agree on?
I just think college football definitely needs to come into some type of rules. This is a capitalistic society. I think everybody should be able to capitalize off their name. I don't care if it's, there's golfers that turn pro at a certain age and they get capitalized off it. But you're signing a letter of intent to play college football. Me personally, I just think you shouldn't be able to get NIL deals after a certain time. Not saying that you can't get it. I don't think you'll be able to get it as a high schooler or incoming freshman. Just think there's some rules after your first year you're at the school, you are able to gain some type of deal. I just think at 18, I know we could go and fight the war. We could go into the Army. We could do a lot of these things at 18. But when you sign up to play in the college, playing college football at NCAA, you're agreeing to step into their realm. We're going to give you a leeway, but they have to be some type of rules. And I'm not smart enough to know what that could be, the laws and all that. But it has to be some type of uniformity around college football, because if not, I just think the big dogs who have the most money is going to continue to get the players. Players could go in just to the transfer portal and say, highest bidder comes along, see what you got for me. Just those types of things. Jordan Anderson, he's the best receiver in college football. He could put his name in the portal and he could go capitalize off of it. And there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion, because he should be able to. But for college football's sake, and I love college football. Anybody know me? High school sports is the best. College football second. Pros is third. So I love college football. I watch from Saturdays. My wife gets upset with me because I watch the 12 o'clock game. Doesn't matter who's playing, to the 10 o'clock game. Just love college football. I just don't want it to continue to go down this road. But I am for players able to earn money off their name.
Terence, I think you're a smart guy. I really do. I know you're a person that puts a lot of thought in this kind of stuff. You care about sports at the high school, college level, everything is in between. So obviously your opinion matters a lot to us. I certainly appreciate your time here today. And for the folks who want to be a part of the coaching that you're out there doing with that next generation of wide receiver, pass catcher each and every day. And by the way, we got to say pass catchers now, because a lot of these great tight ends are catching the football so much that we got to make sure we include them in this discussion too. How can they be a part of what you're doing with the Terence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy?
You can find me on all social medias at Terence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terence, great stuff. Thanks for your time. We'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, it's really good from Terence Edwards. It really is. And I love his thoughts there at the end about, listen, how do you make sure there is a college athletics and also take care of players, something that we're very much in favor of doing around here. We like the idea of that. And it seems like the place that all of this is eventually heading is towards the big pot of the real money. The real money in college athletics is the television contracts. These are just gigantic billion-dollar type figures in many cases. And at some point in time, we're kind of heading for a discussion of, well, is that where the money for players should come from? If you don't like NIL, if you don't want NIL to be a thing, if you want the boosters out of this, then the way to eliminate that as an issue is by giving the players the money out of the TV money. And I understand that argument. I really do. I'm skeptical of some certain aspects of the argument, but I understand where the argument comes from. But this is something that Saban said last night. Audio, we don't have time to play for you. But this is something that he said last night that has to be a part of this. It's like, do you want a capitalistic college football where everybody gets what they deserve, or do you want a collectivist college athletics where football helps fund the other sports? Because you can't have both. You can't be, I hate to, bring it to this, but that's kind of the thing. You can't be, hey, college football free market, let it go how it goes, and then use that same pile of money then to also support every other, athletic endeavor that college sports wants to be a part of. At some point in time, some hard choices are going to have to be made, and I find that to be pretty fascinating, but that's there on that. Two more quick points I want to make about all of this. I'll do that here coming up, but first let me remind you, we're cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Boy, great time to be taking a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation after some of what's been going on in college athletics as of late. I think some of us feel like we could use another vacation. And listen, I think you could use a vacation anyway. I mean, this is the time of year we think about that, right? We're heading towards Memorial Day. You get the summer coming up. I've been talking to a lot of high school coaches this week, and there's a period coming up where you got a couple of weeks off with really no football going on for a lot of the high school guys, kind of post-spring practice, and they're all talking about, I'm going here and I'm going there. And a few of the guys I've talked to are like, I'm taking a cruise. So, listen, this is what you need to be doing there as well. You need to be getting a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation all put together, because in addition to the great ports you visit and all the fun entertainment on board, you got great dining options there as well. You get the classic experience like the main dining room or the Windjammer Cafe, which is a really good good buffet, but you've got this incredible collection of specialty restaurants right now, whether it be Chops Grill, you want a Zumi, that's an hibachi style restaurant. There's the Playmaker Sports Bar and Grill, you've heard us talk about that before. That was on Independence of the Seas, the ship we visited in April. Lots of these ships have us Playmakers, or all of them have a Chops Grill, and some of them even have some brand new concepts. Great Italian, Mexican, all kinds of really fun specialty restaurants on board these Royal Caribbean cruise ships. So my friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority can help you out with this. Find them online, tcava.com. That's tcava.com, or give them a call, 770-952-8300, 770-952-8300. All right, a quick point. By the way, this just coming out, Mark Passwater's a reporter for Rivals on Twitter, saying that A&M just informed members of the media that Jimbo Fisher will take questions at 10 a.m. That's Central Time. That means we're 10 minutes away from a Jimbo Fisher sound-off here. Fisher's going to take questions at 11 Eastern Time this morning. So we've gotten a little bit of a response from Deion Sanders calling Nick Saban a liar. Jimbo Fisher is taking questions. This is just fun, right? Because it is very unusual in late May for a head coach to have an impromptu press conference like this, but that's how serious Jimbo Fisher thinks this is. And it is serious, because Nick Saban threw an intense allegation at Jimbo. And here's the thing you understand. For all intents and purposes, there really is no NCAA anymore. And when it comes to like college football, strong influence on the NCAA is by the NCAA over college football is not really something we've had for a long time anyway, if ever. One of the reasons why institutionally people take this kind of stuff so seriously is, if you think about this in like black and white print, what Saban accused Jimbo Fisher of yesterday was not breaking an NCAA rule, although that's kind of the way in which Saban was pushing this. Saban actually accused Jimbo Fisher of breaking the law. I don't believe those laws will ever be enforced. In most states, certainly Travis Hunter in Georgia, a lot of states, it's illegal to use NIL money as an inducement to a player to come to your program. And as I said before, there's a lot of laws in the books that don't get enforced. I believe this might kind of fall into that category. But the accusation that Saban throws at Jimbo, you bought and paid for your entire class. Like, that's not the kind of thing that we just kind of laugh off here. Now, you and I may laugh that off because it's just juicy soap opera drama for us. But if you're A&M, Saban just accused you of breaking the law. Not just breaking an NCAA rule, because the NCAA rule book's so ponderous that I'm probably breaking one right now. But the law is a little different on that. So interesting to see that Jimbo Fisher's going to take comments. Obviously, most of you watch and listen to the show after we record it live, so you may know more about this then than we do now, but in real time here, we're about 10 minutes away from that taking place, which is really interesting. Now, let me give you a couple other quick points here for a moment. You know who I find myself thinking about on a day like this? Is Tennessee. Let me tell you why. So, Tennessee reportedly is just throwing millions of dollars around in NIL money, right? They got this big collective, and Nico Imaliva, you know him, the five-star quarterback for the 2023 class. Suppose they're giving him $8 million. And Tennessee is just a big player in the NIL scene, according to their own folks. Folks in Knoxville seem to believe that they are a player on the scene. Their NIL collective is changing the game. How mad are they right now that Nick Saban last night ranted against NIL culture. He mentioned Deion Sanders. He mentioned Jimbo Fisher. He mentioned Miami. It didn't even occur to him to mention Tennessee. So even in the NIL era, with Tennessee trying to throw a bunch of money at all of this, they still can't get what they believe is their most hated rival, what they believe is their number one rival. They still can't get Alabama to know they're even alive. Like, if anybody's mad today, it's probably the folks at Tennessee, because they're like, wait, after all this, what we supposedly do NIL and collective and Nico Iamaleava and everything else, Nick Saban still doesn't care about us? You got to imagine that's a little bit of a thorn in the side of the Tennessee Vols here today. And then one more point on this. It's about to get very interesting for Nick Saban. Jimbo Fisher's already said that, in basically no uncertain terms, that he knows where all the bodies are buried. So there's literally no telling what he might say today. I mean, Jimbo's one of these guys, you get him going, he kind of gets rolling here. There is literally no telling what he might say. And there is definitely no telling what Deion Sanders might say in the future, because not being a coach in the SEC, being a guy that's kind of more at that kind of FCS level, as Terence Edwards kind of, suggested before. Listen, all of this is just sort of good for him. So whatever he needs to do to kind of get back at Nick Saban, there's really very little disincentive from him doing that. Nick Saban better be very careful with all of this, because Saban, one way or another, is near the end of his career, 70 years old. And listen, right now, Saban's reputation in sports is really pretty bulletproof. There are a lot of people who think he's not only the greatest college coach of all time, college football coach, there are people who think he's the greatest coach, period. But, reputations can be tarnished. I'll give you a couple quick examples here. Look at Coach K for a moment. Now, Coach K is still a revered figure, that's true. But Coach K's reputation within basketball circles is not what it was 10 years ago. It's not. I think, around, 7, 8 years ago, people started asking the question, wait, is Duke basketball as pristine and as wrinkle-free as we think it is? Because you started hearing things about, whatever else. I mean, there's all kinds of, crazy rumors out there involving Zion Williamson. And some of that actually probably graduates beyond rumor and actually is true, actual report. You had a guy named Mark Titus, who was kind of a media figure a few years ago, pointing a finger at Jeff Capel, some of the things that he was doing while employed at Duke. The point here is that people got mad at Coach K because of his involvement with USA Basketball and some of the ways in which he was leveraging certain things for the benefit of the Duke program. And all of a sudden, Coach K, as this like stately figure at the top of college athletics, there are a lot of people in college basketball who kind of came to the conclusion of, well, actually, he's just not that different than anybody else. He's basically just doing the same stuff that everybody else is doing. He's just sort of doing it with the Duke veneer wrapped around it. Fairly or not, that's kind of what Coach K's reputation is now, not as pristine as it would have been a decade ago. And if Nick Saban wants the end of his career to work out the same way, then keep going down this road. Keep saying, we didn't pay anybody, because you better hope that really is true. If you're going to go around strutting around talking about who you didn't pay and what you didn't do, you better hope that's true. You better hope that you don't have a long list of people saying, well, what about this, what about that, what about that? And maybe all those what about thises and what about that's, maybe none of those are true. But if you start hearing enough of those kind of things over and over again, it will greatly impact how people view Nick Saban. It will change the way people think about him a little bit. A more extreme example of that, for a very different reason, is Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer at one point in time was a coach thought of on par with Nick Saban. And that was not that long ago. It was not that long ago. Think about post-2014 college football playoff, when Meyer beat Saban in the college football playoff. At that point in time, this sport was thought to have two Goliaths. One of them was Urban, one of them was Nick. And in the span of time that has passed since then, less than a decade, by the way, Urban Meyer is not mentioned in those kinds of sentences at all. His reputation has been totally changed for different reasons than what we're talking about here with Nick Saban, admittedly, but it shows you things can change quickly. I mean, in fact, post-Jacksonville Jaguars, there's a thought that Meyer's going to go back and do TV, and yet it was even debatable about whether or not he was unhireable, just given some of the things that are being said about him, some of the things that people are saying about Meyer right now. Things can change with reputations. And if Nick Saban wants to be self-serving and argue right now on, hey, it's bad that players are being paid, we're not doing that, we've never done that, You better hope that's true, because if it's not, someone could gain a lot of attention for themselves by raising their hand and say, let me tell you what I know. You better hope what you're saying is true, because if it's not, someone's going to probably call you out on that. All right, so good time for a little toast here, good time for a little beverage. How about some Finnish long drink for you on all of that? We love the Finnish long drink. Especially, it's great when you head towards the summer, being outside, Memorial Day weekend, you're going to pools, you're having a good time doing all of that. And you may say, well, BA, I hear you talk about the Finnish long drink. In fact, we showed you one of our golden shoes yesterday. One of our great listeners, good enough to support a great beverage that supported us for a long time. And you may say, well, I haven't tried it yet. I'm not even sure which Finnish long drink I should try. Well, here's the cool thing. Right there over my shoulder, if you're watching on video, you see this. That 8-can variety pack, you can get 2 different cans. Or 2 cans of each of the different 4 long drink varieties, whether it be the cranberry, which has the cranberry flavor, the long drink strong, 8.5% alcohol by volume, that's a black can. You can get the long drink zero, that's no carbs, no sugar. Always kind of nice to watch your health with stuff like that. The long drink traditional, it's a blue can. It's got the grapefruit kick to go along with the gin. That's always a lot of fun. A ready-to-drink cocktail. Pop the top on the can, pour it into a glass, or drink it straight out of the can. It's fun to enjoy. Comes from Finland in the 1950s. Summer Games were there in Helsinki. That's the backstory behind this great beverage. It's been in America now for a couple of years. And it's available here in Georgia now, pretty much wherever you are. Golf courses, beverage stores, bars, restaurants, so many other places there as well. Just go to thelongdrink.com, and you can find out where to pick some up today. And you can be enjoying some Finnish long drink here this summer. What a great thing that is to be able to do. By the way, speaking of Golden Shoe, we talked a little bit yesterday about the Georgia-Oregon game and some fun we're having with that right now, and a lot of folks online doing the same thing. And one of the things I love about our Golden Shoe Time is it's a great chance for you to share stuff with me that other creative people are doing online. We like to give them a little bit of credit for that. So let's give you a Golden Shoe here today. So April Stout made this. Very funny. It's like Kirby is a duck hunter with all the ducks there. We talked about the duck hunting thing from Georgia yesterday. Opening day of duck season. All those Oregon O's there on that. So pretty good stuff there on that. Do we have the person that sent that to us as well? Okay, so somebody sent that to me, so always appreciate you tagging me on stuff like that. Good stuff from April. We'll make you a Golden Shoe winner here today. By the way, lousy stinking Gators, they can't even pay players to come to their program, and it's been 4,879 days since they have won a national championship. And 163 days from right now, Gator Hater Countdown, Dogs back in Jacksonville and getting another win against those lousy stinking Gators. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cooldown. We'll take your comments here online. All of it presented by our friends at R.S. Andrews. And by the way, don't forget, it's going to be very hot today, 90-something degrees, I believe. So I've been telling you it was on its way. Now it's here, that warm weather season. So air conditioning, if you're dealing with some issues, find our friends at R.S. Andrews. Let them get your AC unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs. They can get you feeling cool again. Somebody may have told you that air conditioning unit you have is past its shelf life and it can't do anything for you anymore. Well, our friends at R.S. Andrews can make you can show you how maybe you can get like one more year out of that. Just get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Just get a little bit more time out of that air conditioning unit. Find them online, rsandrews.com. They will do that for you. By the way, for those of you joining us a little bit late in the show, I am wearing non-UGA attire today. We have actually high school football later in this evening. Really excited about being there for great jamboree at North Gwinnett with North Gwinnett, Northside Warner Robins, Archer, Marietta. Fun collection of spring games. I believe this is the first time that a spring games have ever been televised in the state of Georgia, I believe. But 2 great games featuring 4 really good teams, very talented teams, debuting some of the finalists for our Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame, which is going to be announced, the inaugural class coming up later on this fall. Special guests, all kinds of really fun stuff going down on Peachtree TV tonight. So I'm kind of, sort of dressed and ready to go for some of that. So that's the story behind all of this. So your comments here for a moment, and then we'll bounce out of here on a Thursday. Let me go to DawgNation.com to begin with. Fishing Dog says, for clarification, do I support breaking the law? Are you talking about with improper benefits? So here's what I'll tell you. Have you ever seen the HBO show The Wire? Do you know this show? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Well, there's a great speech in The Wire that I think really applies very well to college athletics. And I'll give you like a paraphrase of this. So one of the police guys is up there talking about the frustration they have of being a police officer. And he talks about like in the early days when they made it illegal to basically have an alcoholic beverage outside. And that presents a real dilemma for police officers. This is him speaking. That it presents a dilemma for police officers. Because on the one hand, if you're going to go around and arresting every single person who's on the street corner and, this is downtown Baltimore, on the street corner and, whatever else, that like the police are not going to have any time to do anything else. If you're going to enforce the open container thing on the streets of Baltimore at this particular time, the police officer says on the wire, you're not going to have time to do anything else. On the other hand, though, is if you drive by as an officer and don't enforce the law right there, you create a level of chaos because all of a sudden now people are left to say, well, what other laws are you not going to enforce? And you kind of create sort of a chaotic scene there in the streets that can lead to a lot of other issues, which is, I think we'd say, kind of true. It's like, okay, something like this, it could completely monopolize your time trying to enforce it, or it could lead people to say that all of a sudden we're not enforcing law, so therefore let's push the limit more and more and more. So what the guy said on the wire was that the greatest compromise in like civic history was taking the bottle, putting it in a paper bag. All of a sudden now there's like plausible deniability. Police officer could drive by, see somebody drinking something out of a paper bag, and basically you could kind of pretend that was whatever it was. It certainly wasn't proved it was alcoholic. On the other hand, folks could kind of enjoy what they wanted to do because it was just a summer night, more fun to be outside than it was inside. Now, listen, I'm not telling you that's the right way to go about things, but it is an idea. It is an idea. And for me, the same thing's kind of true when it comes to whatever may have gone on in the past, Eric Dickerson's Trans Am or whatever other story you've heard from back in the past. I'm not saying it's right, but it may have been better. And I don't know what you do about that. Now, we can talk about, what should be, or we can kind of talk about what is. And when I look at the way in which college athletics thrived during a time in which supposedly, and for the purposes of this show in kind of an official capacity, I'm not willing to stipulate anything on the record. But if these things supposedly had gone on in the past, they may have been wrong, but the mechanism in terms of how it allowed college athletics to operate, maybe it was better than what we have right now. Randy Hall says are Dion and Saban battling for an Aflac NIL deal. Those Aflac commercials are going to get a lot harder to do. I think that's probably true. That may be true. BA's listening face, which is a funny username, says that faint sound you may have heard was Lane Kiffin high-fiving Mike Leach. Yeah, that's very funny. And Kiffin's already had some fun with this. You knew he would be. He's already been kind of like Kiffin's the guy. And look, you either had this guy in your high school or you were this guy, the instigator. When so-and-so like had war of words in chemistry class with somebody else, all of a sudden, you got somebody right in the middle trying to egg them on and get them to fight. Like, that's what Lane Kiffin basically is. And by the way, if you don't know who that person was in your high school, you may have been that person. You're just somebody that's like instigating, trying to get trouble stirred up. Like, Lane Kiffin wants every bit of this. Not because it benefits him, just because it's fun for him to watch. I think that's the case. James Lawson also checks in to say, I'll die on this hill. I think Saban genuinely cares for the future of college football, and he has nothing to lose at this point by starting all of this. Maybe that's the case. James, I don't doubt that Saban does have some true, I don't want to say altruistic. That seems like too fancy of a word. But concerns that are greater than just his own benefit. But when he argues so loudly for what's clearly of his own benefit, I think it obscures the other things that he might say, which do have value. In the 7 minutes that Saban spoke about NIL last night, a lot of what he said, I do truly believe is quite valuable. I do truly believe is quite valuable. But I think it just gets obscured because he's arguing some other things that just sort of feel like him complaining about threats to his throne. Brian Whitehead says that Jimbo's talking right now. So, Michael, let's keep our eye on Jimbo Fisher to see if he says anything of note here, and we'll give it to you here during our R.S. Andrews Cooldown if he does. Now, I can't stay on all day long today. I do apologize for that, but we'll try to watch it closely here just for a minute. All right, on YouTube. I hope everybody's doing well. A lot of folks over here talking. Always good to see that. AKA checks in to say, let's go Saban. He likes, I guess, what he's hearing from Saban there. Frank Patterson says, why are these coaches taking the pro boxing UFC route and talking trash promotions just to get a 3:30 or 7:30 kickoff? It does feel very pro wrestling promo-ish, doesn't it? Foster Moss says, ESPN presents 30 for 30, how NIL and sliced bread finished Nick Saban. That's actually really funny. Really funny, Foster. I like that. Johnny says that Saban is only calculated for his own benefit. He doesn't want to compete with equal rosters. I mean, I have to say, a lot of what Saban has said over the course of the last couple of days certainly makes that statement feel true, whether it is or not. Lesko says, now that Mullen's gone, who is the new resident punching bag for UGA fans? Is it Jimbo or is it Brian Kelly? So Florida will always be the number one rival, I believe, for Georgia fans. We'll always believe here that a good Georgia fan is a Gator hater first and foremost. But admittedly, I don't know that Billy Napier has introduced himself to that rivalry very much yet. Now, maybe he will. Maybe he's going to say something crazy soon. Maybe that's the case. But I think you're right in that in terms of the personality that Dan Mullen became, no one has really stepped into that void as of yet. But this could be an interesting year where we see if somebody does. Fair question. Let's see what else. Thomas Tyson says that Jimbo is going in right now. I don't doubt that he is. I do not doubt that he is. Paul Moon says the NIL stuff just doesn't really move the needle for me. I really don't care. I think it's good for players to be paid, and I don't think it's a risk to college football, but it does need some regulating. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, look, here's my thing on this, Paul. I have strong opinions loosely held. Like, maybe 2 years from now, maybe you're right. Maybe it was just the next thing to change in college sports. Maybe that's the case. And if that is the case, I'll be happy to acknowledge that. I don't mind saying I'm wrong if I am wrong, because I am a little more concerned about some of this kind of stuff than maybe it sounds like you are. But I have also told people, both publicly and privately, that, hey, I can't be 100% sure this isn't just natural resistance to things being a little bit different. Can't be too sure about that. I do talk to a lot of other coaches, though, and, you know, there are a lot of coaches who are concerned, and I'm talking about at all levels, college, high school, everything else. And, you know, at the high school level, they're not really so much worried about NIL because for the average player, NIL is not really a big factor. But they are really worried about the transfer portal. They are really worried about that. I had a coach tell me that in a lot of cases, what you're seeing is a guy is getting about half as many offers as he would have gotten before. Like, let's say I'm a guy that would get 6 offers. Now I'm only getting 3. Now you can only commit to one of those offers, but that's still fewer choices to be made for a high school player. And we know Group of 5 level, FCS level, there are a lot of programs that aren't recruiting any high school kids right now, which means there are hundreds of fewer opportunities to play college football for high school guys. Like, and I'm not saying you're this way, Paul, but for some people, all college football is an excuse to drink and an opportunity to gamble. I'm not saying that's you. I'm not. But they don't really think of any college football as anything more than just entertainment, right? It's just a delivery vessel for vice, you know, drinking, gambling, whatever else. But there are other people who see college sports as like a springboard to a successful, happy life. And it's really those people that I keep in mind when it comes to what we want the sport to be. As a form of entertainment for those of us who want to be entertained, it'll always probably exist in some form or fashion. But as a change agent for young men, something we don't have enough of right now, positive forces for change, as a change agent for young men, my belief is we need to make sure we keep the sport strong to ensure that. Let's see what else. Thomas Tyson says that Jimbo called Saban a narcissist. That's actually funny. Cindy OG says, who would win a fight between Jimbo or Saban? The question is not who would win a fight. It's who would be the first one to reach for a foreign object, like a wrench or something like that. Because that's really what it comes down to. Like, I don't know that Saban or Jimbo is throwing a strong enough blow on their own to really do much damage. But if somebody got in trouble, who's going to rake the eyes? who's going to pull some hair. Now, in Jimbo's case, there's not much hair to pull, or you might pull some of those plugs right out. But that's the real question, is not who would win the fight, but who would cheat to win the fight. And I guess that's ultimately what this argument's even about to begin with. All right, let's see what else. Let's see what else. Oh, by the way, new YouTube commenter, Jimbo Sliced Bread, which is very funny. I like that commenter name. What else is going on over here? Greg Rosenberg says Saban wasn't ranting. He was talking to a room full of Bama boosters, and it was a call to action for them. Well, my understanding, Greg, is that's pretty clearly what Nate Oates did. What I've been told is that, you know, the basketball coach, Nate Oates, essentially did call Alabama boosters to get more involved. He spoke about not falling behind. Nate Oates used those words. That's not really what I took Nick Saban to be saying right there. I took Nick Saban to be saying something a little bit different than that. You know, kind of calling for a rule change or just kind of an end to some of this chaos. So I didn't take Saban's words quite the same way that you did, although it does sound like that's pretty much what the basketball coach Nate Oates said in the same room last night. All right, here's Jimbo Fisher. He says, and by the way, nice graphic work here. It's despicable. We're taking shots at 17-year-old kids. We never bought anyone. When Saban doesn't get his way or things don't go his way, go dig into Saban's past. It's despicable. It's personal to us, and I know the guy really well. Oh, my gosh. Keep this in mind now. Jimbo was Nick Saban's offensive coordinator at LSU. Jimbo and Saban do go back a long way. I told you before, Saban better be very careful. He better be very careful, because saying something on kind of a, you know, short-sighted basis to get his way now can unlock all kinds of unintended consequences. The quote here, when Saban doesn't get his way, go dig into Saban's past. It's despicable. I know the guy really well. That's a threat. That is a threat. He also says some people think they are God. Jimbo says you coach with people like Bobby Bowden and learn how to do things. You coach with other people and learn how not to do things. There's a reason I ain't go back to work with him. Are you kidding me? Is this not the most fun thing in the world? And by the way, Memorial Day weekend or Memorial Day week, we got SEC spring meetings in Destin, wherever it is. These two guys are about to be in the same room like next week. I mean, can you believe this? Man, there is nothing like the SEC. AKA says, let me be clear. I don't like what Saban says. I was just drawing similarities between him and I can't go down the political thing. So his "Let's Go Saban" was not a support of Saban. It was a play on the common political phrase. My bad, AKA. My bad. I apologize for that. Thank you for clarifying. Thomas Tyson says Jimbo said Saban's crying because he can't get his way. So Tony Sukalis, a reporter here, says that Jimbo Fisher said Nick Saban has tried to call him since last night's comments, but he's not taking the call. We are done. That's Jimbo Fisher essentially saying if the phone doesn't ring, you know that it's me. Man. William Perry says, I'm grabbing some Kirby Smart popcorn and kicking back to watch Saban versus Jimbo. William, it's funny you say that because I was thinking the exact same thing. The Kirby Smart popcorn gif of just like, hey, what's the old phrase? My name is Paul, and this is between y'all. Like Kirby Smart is Paul right now, and this is between y'all of Jimbo and Saban. And look, I think there's a lot of important issues being kind of discussed here, and I do think getting to the facts somehow, some way would help us all. But my goodness, what a thing! My goodness. Let's see what else. Lesko says college football has turned into a reality show, just drama. I got to say, some drama I find to be entertaining. I find this to be pretty entertaining. I mean, I'm a little worried about where this is heading for college athletics, but for now, I'm pretty fun. I think it's pretty funny. Scott Harris says NIL affects coaches more than players. I mean, I would say that look, coaches are more worried on a day-to-day basis about transfer stuff than NIL stuff. I really believe. Like the common argument of people say, well, players should get paid. Like, I don't really know anybody that's against that as a kind of basic notion, coaches included. It's just all the stuff that goes along with that the complications kind of enter into. What else? Jonathan Aaron, very funny on Dan Mullen, trying to explain to Billy Napier about all the different seasons they have in Florida. You got recruiting season, you got everything else. So pretty good stuff there. All right, we got to take a few more comments, and we'll get ready to go. That's pretty good, Jonathan. I like that. Paul Moon says, I can see the portal being a bigger risk than NIL. The two combined have led to the circus that we're in, but I think they'll wrangle it in. I kind of do too, Paul, but I do believe that, like, eventually I do think you said wrangled it in. I think that's probably going to be the case there as well. But I think that someone's going to, or some people, group of people, they're going to have to lead in that direction. Like, I don't believe that college football is going to naturally drift towards a resolution to whatever's going on right now. I really don't. And I do believe that if college football is sort of allowed to naturally drift or naturally evolve, I do suspect it's heading towards a worse place. I really do. To me, it's just like the 2020 season, where had college football been allowed to naturally drift in the direction that it was going, the season was going to be canceled. When the Big Ten made those overtures about not having a season, everyone was thought to eventually be falling in line. The Big Ten was going to be the leader in all of that. And everyone was just going to drift in that direction. Pac-12 obviously is going to do whatever the Big Ten tells them to do. And so they're just going to drift there in that direction. Well, leaders stepped up and led. Obviously, Greg Sankey was the most prominent example of that, but there were folks in the ACC that did that too. Big 12 was kind of a part of that in some ways there as well. Leaders led, and the natural drift was averted. I think you have to have a thing here as well, where leaders have to lead, and they have to paint a picture going forward that people don't automatically just laugh at. Like when Nick Saban says, we got to bring parity back to college football, people just laugh at that. That's so disconnected from reality that that people just laugh at it. Conversely, if someone like me, who instinctively is a little bit more traditionalist, if I said, we just got to go back to the way things were when you were happy just to get a scholarship. If I were to say that, I'm not saying that, but if I were to say that, people would just laugh at that too. That's obviously, that's obviously not connected to reality. Back before the start of the 2020 season, if someone had said, listen, who cares about health and safety? We got to have football. Man, football is what matters here. Who cares about, keeping players healthy and safe? You got to just go out there and, rub some dirt on it. Like if someone had tried to say that, people would have just laughed at that and said, you're obviously disconnected from reality. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. But that's not what leaders who thought there was a healthy and safe way to have football. That's not what they said. They brought on their scientists. They brought on their, medical type people, and they started explaining things, and they started talking about the procedures they were going to undergo, and they led in the direction of this is the healthy and safe way to have a college football season, and they were right. I think that is the blueprint, that is the template for this right now. Of there are clearly billions of dollars at stake for college athletics. Players clearly deserve some access to that. But this is still a training ground for young men, and you gotta balance those two ideas. And they may seem like they're in conflict with each other. Some people tell you that they are in irreparable conflict with each other. I would say that's not quite the case. That leaders can lead on this. This sport's just awaiting people to do that. But in the very near future, we could get that. Let's see what else. Couple quick comments. We got to go. Boy, Cynthia Wilcox in here fired up today. Cynthia's just dropping all caps left and right. Kirby's Visor says this is the best college football offseason. Yeah, Kirby, I'm right there with you on that. I think you may be on to something there. Tennille kind of agrees. I think you may be on something right there. Jimbo Sliced Bread. kind of laying it down here. Any coach who tries to be virtuous about not playing players is complete. Is it cap? Is that what we say? Is it cap when you're not telling the truth? Am I using that phrase correctly? Basically, no cap meaning you're not lying. Cap means you're lying. Am I right on that? Y'all can help me out with that. Avian Curry also having a good time with this there as well. Shots fired by Jimbo. Yeah, it is great. Jimbo's another one of these guys that you get him going a little bit. He kind of gets that wrestling promo thing going there a little bit there as well. He's already done that. If you don't like it, you better learn to love it. I mean, he did that. He did that not too long ago too. Raphael Wright says NIL is the new wave, like the transfer portal. Welcome to college football draft and free agency boosters and et cetera have been taking over from behind the scenes now. Yeah, in some ways that feels true. Let me go to Facebook here for a moment. We'll get them involved in the discussion. Kind of got stuck on YouTube there for a little while. Let's give some Facebook folks a chance to sound off. Did Brian Whitehead, did Jimbo really say that? That when he was a kid, he'd get slapped across the face for cheating and lying? That's what needs to happen to Saban. Did he say that? Johnny Prescott from on Griff yesterday, playing a little Nintendo. Yeah, Griff talked yesterday about being a Tecmo Bowl guy. So he never really played in a lot of Duck Hunt. The old Nintendo Entertainment System, and George had a great video on that yesterday. I'm glad you enjoyed that, Johnny. Appreciate that. Philip Jordan Wells, very funny. Philip's always got a lot of great pop cultural references in his comments. Matt Rugavina says this may be the best ever use of the Kirby Smart Popcorn GIF. I would agree with that. I believe that's true. I believe there's never been a more apropos use of that right now. Scott Gentry says that Jimbo may very well do a Will Smith slap down. Oh, my gosh. Spring meetings. Kirby's up there talking. Not Kirby. Saban's up there talking. Jimbo. Now, this day and age, let me make it very clear. We don't condone any violence of any sort. But can you imagine Jimbo going up there and just going straight Will Smith on Saban's version of Chris Rock? Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? Jesse Dellinger says, I see some championships getting taken from Alabama soon. I mean, to me, that's the next domino that has to fall here, right? It's like, you want to be the most famous man in America for 5 minutes? Tell a story about what Nick Saban did in his past. Whether it's true or it's not, I mean, whatever. As I said before, I'm not willing to stipulate anything's true. But there is going to be a very high demand for Saban hypocrisy. People like building up people and then tearing them down. Saban's been built up for a number of years, but there's a little bit of a ritualistic component to society where once you like build these lowercase g gods up, then it becomes about tearing them down, and so that's kind of a part of what goes on here. But there's also a thing that the one thing that most people in society seem to agree with, whether you be, kind of over here, kind of over here, kind of up here, kind of down here, whatever else, people don't really like hypocrisy. That's the one thing that generally speaking gets everybody angry, is for someone to present themselves as one thing and actually be another. People don't like that. And that's one of the few things that there's common agreement on. So if Saban has any hypocrisy in his background, I think he's setting himself up for a dangerous situation here. I do. Hugh Nash says, I want a meme of Kirby lounging by a pool, sunglasses on, with an umbrella drink and a championship belt over his shoulder looking at his phone. Hugh, that's very funny to think about. Now, I'm going to tell you this, too, is that in one respect, like these SEC coaches may be a little different than us. In another respect, they are just like us in many ways. You don't think that every one of these coaches that used to work for Nick Saban are in some sort of text thread with each other? Kiffin, Kirby, Muschamp. All these guys are just texting back and forth. Like, you talk about, a charitable contribution. Like, what would I give to know what the text thread between, like, all these coaches is involving this particular topic? Oh, you better believe. All right, more from Jimbo Fisher. He says, You can call me anything you want to call me. You ain't call me a cheat. First of all, I love the way that he uses ain't. To me, like that just makes everything he's saying just feel so much more true. You ain't call me a cheat. I don't cheat. I don't lie. I learned that when I was a kid. If you did that, your old man slapped you side the head. Maybe somebody should have slapped Nick Saban. If you would have told me at the beginning of the week that we would be on a Thursday afternoon, almost afternoon, with Jimbo Fisher saying that someone should have slapped Nick Saban, I would have told you this will be a very interesting week. And as it turns out, that is exactly what's going on. All right, a couple more here. We got to get ready to go. Melinda Moe says Jimbo's getting out the shovels. Yeah, you better believe that. All right, there's a lot I like about Philip Jordan Wells, but there is one thing I definitely do not agree with. He says that in a Dusty Rhodes Ric Flair comparison, that Rhodes would be Nick Saban and Ric Flair would be Jimbo Fisher. I don't think that's the case. I really don't. I think that Saban's a little bit more. I mean, like Ric Flair was the establishment, right? Like that was like the suit, tie, alligator shoes, things like that. You know, Flair was the establishment guy. Dusty Rhodes was son of a plumber. I feel like that if it's a Dusty versus Flair thing, I feel like Jimbo is Dusty. I really do. I think that Saban is Ric Flair. I mean, listen, Saban's like posing with recruits in like a sweater vest. Like that's not a son of a plumber right there. That's clearly the establishment candidate at this point in time. Keith Vold says it's why I say the NCAA has to step up and put some parameters on NIL. The problem is I truly don't think the NCAA has enough power to do this. I think if a body, and by body I mean like entity, if an entity is going to step in and save, I think it's got to be Congress. And listen, and trust me, we're not talking about politics, but I said this to John Stinchcomb the other day, is that I get the sense that there might be a way to write some federal legislation that would put some parameters around this. But I mean, I'm obviously not a lawyer, nor am I smart enough to know how you could like language this so that it would be legal, A, first of all, but B, create a situation that's better than what we have right now. I'm not smart enough to know how it could be done. I'm also skeptical that you could get that many people to agree, like 535 people, you could get them to agree on something that could be passed into law. But to me, if you're looking for like a Hail Mary pass, it comes from Congress more so than the NCAA, I believe. And listen, Paul Moon a moment ago, one of our commenters said he doesn't really care. Maybe it's not that big of a deal. Like, what if Georgia in the future isn't the champion of 129 other teams? What if it's the champion of 40 other teams? Like, what if Georgia and Oregon don't compete in the same classification anymore? What if Georgia and Oklahoma State don't compete in the same classification anymore? Because that's really maybe what this is that, like, fancy pants academic schools, Stanford, Northwestern, people like that, they may just drop sports altogether. And I don't believe they're bluffing when that's been suggested. Like other sort of like middle tier programs, they're not going to be able to keep up. I mean, like the SEC is obviously a huge television contract, but there are people in the SEC that contribute nothing to this. They bring no dowry to the relationship whatsoever. And so maybe you sort of kick them to the curb. And so you're sort of left with like the 30 or 40 programs that really truly matter. And that number actually may be smaller than that. Like maybe that's enough. I mean, maybe in the future we don't really care that Stillwater, Oklahoma, Lubbock, Texas, West Lafayette, Indiana, maybe these places as college sports destinations, maybe we'll forget they ever existed. And maybe, some of these college towns will look like Midwest industrial towns, all boarded up and, the factory closed down and everybody moved out. I mean, maybe that's what Starkville, Mississippi is going to look like one of these days. I don't know. But if it's going to be fixed and keep it all national, if we're going to keep it all together, 5 power conferences, 130 schools playing Division I football, to me, it's the government and not the NCAA that have to save it. Jesse Dellinger also brings up a pretty good point that in theory, everybody's competing right now, but in actuality, only a few schools are. And I don't have a great argument against that. I really don't. That in actuality, there aren't but small handful of schools that can compete for a championship anyway. That's probably true. So, like, if you are kind of remote outpost, if you're Pullman, Washington, if you're, I don't know, wherever you want to be, Pullman, Washington, where Washington State's located. Like, if you're one of these sort of like middle to lower tier Power 5 programs, how much is gained by the theoretical connection to a chance to compete for a college football playoff spot? I don't know. It's a fair question. All right, we got to go for now. Thanks for being here. R.S. Andrews Cooldown. Find R.S. Andrews online for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. Also, check out our friends at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution online at ajc.com. You know they'll have more on this. They'll also have plenty more on the Atlanta Braves. Finishing up a series yesterday in Milwaukee. And a whole lot else going on here around the AJC there on that. Also, a little bit of an issue when it comes to dorm overcrowding at UGA, how they're working to alleviate that. You can find out more about that. And getting ready for the weekend. 15 great things to do here around the Atlanta area this weekend. AJC.com's got you covered on that there, too. Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com. R.S. Andrews there as well for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. Find them online at rsandrews.com. They will take good care of you. We will see you tomorrow for DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. We'll look forward to talking to you then.